All right, everyone. Years ago, I was a smoker up until last October. Actually, the idea was I was going to turn 30 in a few months, and I'm like, I want to give something major up that's holding me back. Smoking made sense. I think it was a good investment of time. For 3 days, it was hell. After that, mysteriously, it started getting better fairly quickly. Within a couple of weeks, it was bearable, and then within a month, most of the cravings were completely gone. Other than occasionally, you'll have like a dream where you're smoking or something, and you'll wake up with a raging, infernal desire to smoke. It passes in like 10 seconds, so unless you've got a pack next to you, you're probably going to be able to overcome it, but it's a really weird feeling. Also, that's less now than before. So I'm no friend of smoking. I think if you're a smoker, you should try to quit. Don't bother switching to vaping. That's stupid. Just fucking quit cold turkey. There are people that have done it. I have. Trust me, if I'm capable of doing it, so are you. It's just you're going to feel like shit for 3 or 4 days. Fucking take a long weekend off at work or do whatever you need to do. And another thing is, make sure that you dote on yourself a little bit during that period. Like, get your favorite foods together and do stuff that will help to take the edge off. It actually does work. If you can make it 3 or 4 days, then you can make it, the rest of your life. But the FDA is planning to perpetuate more drug war rhetoric and try to ban menthol cigarettes. Now, their justification as well. This will reduce smoking rates. Menthol cigarettes have been primarily marketed to the African American community, which doesn't exist. There's no such thing, actually. They mean the Black American community, but whatever. And I'm like sitting there and I'm like, how is that a justification for ignoring the Constitution? The very fact that there are prohibited substances anyway is already unconstitutional. The drug war writ large, which includes the war on tobacco, regardless of how bad tobacco admittedly is itself unconstitutional. The concept that the government can bypass the right to privacy under the Commerce Clause, the Interstate Commerce Clause, when tobacco can be grown and consumed in-state anyway, is totally ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The right to privacy stems to these substances. That's why during the Prohibition era, a constitutional amendment was understood to be required to ban alcohol. It was understood that the government could not ban this substance, nor can it ban any of the other things that it somehow bans without getting challenged in court constantly. It did not have the power to do that because there was no constitutional amendment enabling it. It was understood the temperance era movement people therefore pushed for a constitutional amendment banning alcohol. Where's the amendment banning menthol cigarettes? Where's the amendment banning marijuana? We're getting to the point where we're saying, okay, it's okay to toke up joints, but it's not okay to get a menthol cigarette because the addition of menthol, which is practically inert and just a flavorant, somehow makes the cigarette worse. No, a cigarette is a cigarette is a cigarette. You shouldn't be smoking any of them, but if you choose to smoke, banning the menthol cigarettes is not going to cause you to stop smoking. Like that person who's used to menthol, I'll tell you what they'll do. They'll do one or two things. They'll switch to regular cigarettes, or they'll add their own menthol flavor. It's not going to help anyone. So it's just drug war bullshit. It's another example of a good sounding strategy that won't actually do anything. That's the problem with the drug war. It's like, hey, we don't want people to use drugs. We don't want them to jump off the building or get addicted to heroin. Oh, it sounds family friendly. It's a war on these evil, horrible substances, half of which are actually non-addictive and largely not harmful, but, science be damned, I suppose, at the FDA. It sounds really family friendly, but when you look at the pragmatic effects of the war on drugs, it increases the use of drugs. Meanwhile, they did nothing about the opiate epidemic. Look, for all intents and purposes at this point, the opium epidemic is far worse than smoking in this country. It's taking a hell of a lot of lives. I understand long term, like if you're a pack-a-day smoker, you've got a significantly higher chance of a heart attack, stroke, lung cancer, all of these horrible problems. Understood. The opiate epidemic is causing people to die in the here and now after short terms of usage because they get totally mind-wasted. Or they get shot by the cops, no-knock raid style. By the way, we've got to talk about Maryland's gun laws, too. We've got a war on guns now as well to fucking deal with. Absolutely and completely ridiculous. This suggestion is unconstitutional, not that most of what the FDA does already isn't already, and it won't actually help to prevent smoking. It's not going to help. It's like, okay, so your Camel Crush, by the way, will those be covered? Technically, it's a regular cigarette until you squeeze the filter. By the way, they're disgusting. Are you going to ban those as well? And these companies will throw millions of dollars into a campaign to block this from passage. Oddly enough, the tobacco companies will be arguing from a point of greater legal clarity than the FDA. But this is what these bureaus have devolved into. They pretend all day, well, we're going to keep the food good, and we're going to make sure the pharmaceuticals are properly dispensed and everything. And they never do this. We get an opiate epidemic. We've got outbreaks of fucking salmonella and E. coli in our food constantly. They're fucking stupid. They can't do anything. Fucking abolish the FDA. That's what should be done. It's a waste of billions of dollars of taxpayer money. It's sort of like the EPA that doesn't protect the environment, or the Department of Education that's ruining our educational system and took it from #1 in the world maybe 50 years ago to now somewhere in the low 20s. Wonderful time, and that's during the federalization of education. Just like the federalization of the war on poverty stalled out all the progress we were making in fighting poverty. Oh, extreme poverty is disappearing, and too bad everyone's on the margins of poverty, living paycheck to paycheck, barely able to afford their fucking 50-cent microwave burritos. What a great time we've had with the federal government in charge of these things. No, the FDA should be understood not to have any legal authority that violates the Constitution. Attempting to ban this particular class of substances violates the Constitution. They're trying to use this roundabout methodology. It's sort of like, keep in mind, the federal government uses workarounds for the Constitution constantly, out of a sense of pragmatism that I label false pragmatism. It's like, did you know that technically speaking, there's no reason that a state can't lower the drinking age to 18, or hell, it could have no drinking age at all. The problem is that the government earmarks certain road funding, very important infrastructural spending in very large amounts, only to states that fulfill certain requirements with regards to drinking cessation, including keeping the age at 21. That's why the legal age to smoke weed is being set at 21 basically across the board. There's a reason for that. By the way, the war on weed was never legal. It was never constitutional for them to ban hemp growing. As long as it's not being exported across state lines, there's no federal reason that they should be seen as having any power over these transactions. That includes certain forms of taxes that they levy. Hell, half of what the federal government does, most of the gun control, the war on drugs, the very existence of some of these bureaus, the surveillance state, it all violates a proper understanding of the Constitution. People have slowly over time been boiled like frogs to the point where we spend inordinate amounts of money jailing people for things that shouldn't be crimes, hyper-regulating and micro-taxing basically every transaction that occurs, and robbing people of the right to produce. We have transferred away from capitalism into a bureaucratized corporate structure in which a handful of big-ass multinational monopolies experience no repercussions for repeatedly violating people's rights, while small businesses and individuals get screws put to them. That's basically what's happened. So when they say, well, we'll prevent smoking by banning menthol cigarettes, bullshit. It's not going to prevent any form of smoking. If anything, it'll temporarily make it more taboo and cool, and you'll probably see more people doing the social smoking bullshit, and they'll have all sorts of cute little multicolored attachments for their cigarettes that'll dispense menthol. And it'll be the new rave thing, and you'll have a new generation of rave kids that are now not really kids anymore. They were kids maybe in the late 90s. Now that'll be smoking these now instead. It'll be like clove cigarettes or some bullshit like that. Guaranteed. Absolutely. It'll actually increase the smoking rate, at least among certain groups of people. That's what happens. That's what's happened with the war on drugs. These substances became cool and taboo and rad, man. Because the government demonizes them all throughout elementary and middle school, and then when they get older, they realize that Jimmy over there, because he smoked weed, didn't ruin his life, and then they see Obama smoked weed, and all these celebrities smoke weed. Wow, man, it's so cool, because it's taboo, because it's a good branding opportunity for them. That's about all. Peace out.